I've always found the American Revolution fascinating, not just for its events, but for what it represents. It's a story of how a group of colonists, fed up with being treated like second-class citizens, decided to take on the most powerful empire in the world. But here's the thing. Revolutions don't just happen overnight. They're like a pot of water on a stove. It takes time to boil, but once it does, there's no stopping it. After the French and Indian War, Britain was in debt and thought, hey, why not make the colonies pay for their own defense? Sounds reasonable, right? Except the colonists didn't see it that way. They'd been pretty much left alone for years, and now suddenly King George III was all up in their business. The British started passing laws like the Sugar Act and the Currency Act. These weren't just annoyances. They were like a mosquito buzzing in the colonists' ears, constantly reminding them that they weren't in control of their own affairs. The Stamp Act of 1765 was the straw that broke the camel's back. Suddenly, everything from newspapers to playing cards needed a special stamp. And of course, that stamp wasn't free. The colonists responded with boycotts and protests. They even formed a Stamp Act Congress, which was like a colonial version of a strongly worded letter to the manager. Events like the Boston Massacre in 1770 and the Boston Tea Party in 1773 certainly didn't help calm things down. The Boston Massacre, which, by the way, only resulted in 5 deaths, making it more of a Boston kerfuffle, became a symbol of British oppression. And the Tea Party? Well, that was less about tea and more about making a point. These events didn't just happen in isolation. They were part of a growing sense of colonial identity. The more Britain tried to control the colonies, the more the colonies realized they had more in common with each other than with their rulers across the ocean. On April 19, 1775, British troops marched to Concord to seize weapons, but the colonists were ready. The battles of Lexington and Concord kicked off the war with the shot heard round the world. It's a poetic phrase, but let's be real. The Battle of Bunker Hill followed in June. Now, here's a fun fact. Most of the fighting actually took place on Breed's Hill, but Battle of Breed's Hill just doesn't have the same ring to it, does it? The British won, but at a heavy cost. It's like winning an argument but losing all your friends in the process, not really a victory. Now, let's fast forward to 1777 and the Battle of Saratoga. This was a big deal, and not just because the Americans won. It was like the colonial army finally got its learner's permit. They proved they could actually drive this revolution thing. But more importantly, it caught the attention of the French. And the French, still sore about losing the 7 Years' War, were all too happy to stick it to the British. The French alliance was a game changer. Suddenly, the Americans had access to supplies, troops, and most importantly, a navy. It's like going from fighting the school bully alone to having the entire football team on your side. Of course, it's not that simple. The war dragged on for years, with campaigns stretching from Canada to the southern colonies. The British tried to divide the colonies, focusing on the South where they thought they'd find more loyalist support. But the Americans, led by generals like George Washington, kept the revolution alive through sheer determination and some pretty clever strategies. One of these strategies was guerrilla warfare. Instead of facing the British in big set-piece battles, the Americans would strike quickly and then disappear. It's like playing a game of whack-a-mole, except the moles have muskets and really don't like taxes. And then came Yorktown in 1781. General Cornwallis, leading a large British army, found himself trapped between American and French forces on land and the French fleet at sea. It was like being caught between a rock and a hard place, if the rock and hard place were both trying to shoot you. After a siege lasting about 3 weeks, Cornwallis surrendered. Legend has it that the British band played "The World Turned Upside Down" as they laid down their arms. If true, it was a pretty fitting choice. The war didn't officially end until the Treaty of Paris in 1783. The treaty recognized the United States as an independent nation and set its borders from the Atlantic to the Mississippi. It's like finally moving out of your parents' house and getting your own place. Exciting, but also a little terrifying. So, what did all this fighting and chaos lead to? Well, a new nation, obviously. But more than that, it led to new ideas about government and society. The revolution spread concepts like republicanism and individual liberty. Of course, as always, there's a caveat. These new freedoms weren't extended to everyone. Slavery continued, women couldn't vote, and Native Americans faced continued displacement. The American Revolution wasn't just about breaking away from Britain. It was about creating something new, an experiment in self-government that continues to this day. It set a precedent for colonies around the world and inspired revolutions in places like France and Haiti. So next time you're sipping tea or grumbling about taxes, remember, you're participating in a tradition that's been shaping the world for nearly 250 years. And that's pretty revolutionary.